folks need to understand that we are fighting and that we have historically always fought against U.S. imperialism. I got this dope shirt from a Boricua poet called Omar Eloy, and it says, "Si los de abajo se mueven, los de arriba se caen." Right? If those on the bottom move, those on the top fall.
Mira que ya viene la revolución, para que se asustan será pa' mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
I go by Libre ex Sankara. I am a poet, cultural worker, and organizer here on Tequesa, Seminole, and Miccosukee land, also known as Miami. And today I'm going to be touching on the subject of Borikén. Right, there we go. The other way. There we go. My home country. And just talking about the importance of fighting for the liberation of Borikén, and why I view Borikén as the crux of capitalism, right? If we're able to liberate the country of Borikén and its people, it would help to lead to the downfall. And that goes with most countries, but most countries are not in a colonial relationship to the U.S. in the same way that since 1898 Borikén has been. So that's going to be what I'm touching on, and I'm just going to cover a few maybe major current events to give people some context as to why I'm pushing for this. And so obviously the history starts in 1493 on Ponce de Leon, but we don't have to go back that far, because we can see how our current situation is simply an extension of what happened in 1493, and how we continue to be put in a colonial position. And so I want to propose that Borikén is a crux to capitalism, which is why in the 1970s, when there were organizations like the Young Lords, I have one of their pins up here.
Beautiful pin.
You said what?
Beautiful pin.
I give thanks. The Young Lords, the Macheteros, that's why a lot of these individuals were being attacked, because in order for capitalism to exist, it must exploit. But what we also have to understand is that exploitation dives into material conditions, right? So even the colonial name that Puerto Rico is, that Borikén's given Puerto Rico, if you break it into English, it means rich port, right? And so when Borikén was colonized, it was colonized for the strategic port that it played in connecting the Americas to Europe, where the original colonizers came from. And for the U.S., it's simply a strategic port to move goods, to practice military tactics, if you're familiar with the history of Vieques. But the current context is that Puerto Rico, Borikén has become the guinea pig of the U.S. yet again, right, for this idea that Bitcoin is going to be the new thing, and that we can create an economy that is sufficient solely on Bitcoin. So you have a lot of individuals in like the Forex industry and the Bitcoin industry moving to the island. They recently passed a law that gives tax benefits only to foreigners, not to Boricuas, which leads to the forced migration of Boricuas away from our country and to the colonizer country, which plays into a lot of these migration patterns. Comrade Oscar Lopez told me a few months ago, he told me the thing about our country is that ellos quieren la jaula sin los pájaros. They want the cage without the birds. Essentially, what the U.S. is trying to do is to create the conditions that Boricuas will no longer be able to be in the country, and the land will just be left for the colonizers to do with it whatever they want, to create whatever narrative or whatever history they want. That's why Luma just got instated, where our electricity bills are going up ridiculous amounts, even though most cost of living was already unbearable. Keeping in mind that the average income of someone in Borikén is about $20,000. The CEO of Luma, which is the new privatized energy company, is over $1 million. This is not someone that lives in Borikén. This is not someone who was affected by Hurricane Maria and forced to migrate to Turtle Island. And on top of that, instead of actually taking care of the people, we still have the La Junta, the Fiscal Control Board, that is not democratically elected. It is 6 individuals whose sole task is, after being appointed by the US government, is to tell us, Boricuas, how to pay our debt back to the US, as if we owe anything to the US. And again, this creates the conditions to normalize Boricuas either leaving the island or mentally thinking that we have to be dependent on the US government for aid and that we cannot function on our own as a country. Because, you know, people should dive into new things that are coming out. There was recently a book that came out, and it's called Puerto Rico hacia una economía nacional soberana by Javier A. Hernandez. It dives into an economic explanation as to why moving towards sovereignty is actually beneficial to the country of Borikén, and pushes back on the myth that without the US, without imperialism, that we cannot function as a country. And so I just want to, you know, I'm going to respect people's time. So I just want to throw that out as a piece of knowledge. Folks need to understand that we are fighting and that we have historically always fought against US imperialism. I got this dope shirt from a Boricua poet called Omar Eloy, and it says, "Si los de abajo se mueven, los de arriba se caen." Right? If those on the bottom move, those on the top fall. And you know, as Boricuas, we are always, as our comrades are in Palestine and in other countries, we are always fighting. And we're doing that through art, but also through physical things. Students are protesting right now, and not a lot of people are talking about that, right? That they're trying to privatize the universities. So again, I just wanted to uplift the fact that our people are fighting, and that we must be in solidarity. The only way Borikén is going to get really free is if we are moving along and relying on our comrades that understand our sovereignty. Countries like Nicaragua, like Venezuela, like Cuba, DPRK, Palestine, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for this opportunity, comrade. And, you know, in the spirit of the macheteros, you know, we are going to fight. We are going to fight for this thing called liberation, and we're going to do it with our people. Hasta la victoria siempre.
Hasta la victoria siempre. Most definitely, Comrade Libre, Viva Borikén Libre. And I'm glad you raised the importance of supporting Borikén independence, revolutionary independence, because as you mentioned, all of the horrible atrocities of US imperialism and colonialism have been tried and tested on Borikén, on the Borikén people, whether it's medical experiments, whether it's economic exploitation, neo-colonialism, Bitcoin, everything. Borikén has always been a laboratory of experiments. I grew up in New York, born and raised a lot of Boricuas, and I have to say some of the most radical militant people I've ever met are from Borikén. So I definitely appreciate that, brother. Thank you so much for joining. Comrade Libre is a good comrade. And shout out to Troika Collective, by the way, as well, who also does amazing work. And we're probably going to have Comrade Khalil join us later on. Comrade Libre, take care. Comrade, peace out. Have a great day.
Pa'lante.